Yeah, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is over. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, A Thorn in My Side. The man who rules the world takes on an agent from the CIA from the Black Boule in this all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' A Thorn in My Side in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Better get the coleslaw, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue. On Wednesday, Marvel Studios decided to announce the cast of its upcoming Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, Avengers Doomsday. And as it announced the cast for Avengers Doomsday, it presented us over 50 actors in roles in Avengers Doomsday, and that basically shows how this whole project is doomed before a single frame of film has been shot. Now, Avengers Doomsday is known for being the film which brought Robert Downey Jr. back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, instead of playing the role of Iron Man and Tony Stark, he will be playing Victor Von Doom, and I don't think his star power will be able to overcome the overall odds as related to this film, which is already struggling as related to what I believe to be superhero movie fatigue and a series of films as part of Fail 4, I mean Phase 4, and Fail 5, I mean Phase 5, and Fail 6, I mean Fail 6, Phase 6, as related to the decline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, what's being presented here with this large cast for Avengers Doomsday is a desperate move from Kevin Feige to basically try to get the ship right as related to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, what he's doing is going to do even more damage than the three previous phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, as a writer of screenplays, novels, and comic books, I understand that there are certain rules to writing, and sadly, Kevin Feige has basically broken all of those rules as Marvel Studios has gone into this state of decline ever since Avengers Endgame. Now, the big problem with the Marvel Cinematic Universe is that the overall story for the Infinity Saga was over, and it ended with Avengers Endgame and ended in a way that basically concluded the story. And once you conclude a story on screen, it's basically over. Unfortunately, Kevin Feige and Bob Iger over at Disney are so desperate to keep the money coming in that they continue to make superhero movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even though they did not have a structure for building these stories like they did in the first three phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe to give us a beginning, middle, and end like we got in the Infinity Saga. Now, in the Infinity Saga, we got a structured story as related to this series of movies where each of the movies, while they had a beginning, a middle, and an end, basically were building towards an overreaching story arc. And once that overreaching story arc ended, sadly what happened is that the Marvel Cinematic Universe kept going on without any sort of focus or direction at all. And even worse, they continued to make even more content, looking to build a larger world with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and this oversaturation of content is what wound up alienating lots of viewers and led to some viewers basically taking superhero movies for granted because there was so much content on that they had so many choices that it basically overwhelmed them, and it made it where people didn't start asking that critical question about Marvel Cinematic Universe films: why should we care? And that's all due to the whole commodified process over at Disney as related to superhero movies. Marvel Studios basically went from a place where people were being creative and telling original and unique stories that were adapted from the source material to becoming an assembly line for superhero movies that basically pumped out superhero movies similar to the way that General Motors employees went out here and manufactured vehicles like Chevrolet Citations, Pontiac Phoenixes, Buick Skylarks, and Oldsmobile Forenzas, basically just manufacturing these movies without any sort of standard for quality and manufacturing them without any sort of heart and soul. And it led to these movies just coming off the assembly line very bland, very uninspired, with no real story and no real character development, and no reason for anyone to care. And all of this basically led to a decline in quality as related to these films, starting with Eternals in 2020. And in 2025, we have Marvel Cinematic Universe basically continuing to produce a series of flops, such as Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and The Marvels, and its most recent flop, Captain America: Brave New World, which they tried to gaslight and spin people into believing was a hit. But Captain America: Brave New World was not a hit because the film cost over $300 million and would have to make $1.2 billion to break even. And right now, basically, is one of the big flops of 2025 because it has a budget on the same level as Snow White, which recently flopped. And the Avengers Doomsday movie is destined to flop. It is destined to flop because with a cast of over 50 A-list actors, this film's budget is basically going to be at least $500 million minimum, and will possibly need to make at least $1.5 to $2 billion at the box office in order to break even. And these were the numbers for James Cameron's Avatar, because James Cameron's Avatar is considered to be the highest grossing movie in the world. But I doubt Avengers Doomsday will be able to make those kinds of numbers, and basically at the proportion of the cost that they're spending. I doubt that, again, that Disney will be able to make a profit on this movie or even break even when you have a cast of over 50 actors. Now, what Marvel Studios is trying to do in desperation is try to capitalize on the magic of movies like Spider-Man No Way Home and Deadpool and Wolverine, which did over $1 billion at the box office. But I think they're going to wind up rolling Snake Eyes because the budget of this film is just too large. The budget, when you have a cast of over 50 actors, this is going to be, again, a budget that's just too large to be able to pull any sort of profit. Even with the global box office, I don't think Avengers Doomsday will be the hit that will revive Marvel Studios. I think Doomsday is basically the whole studio at Marvel Studios is doomed, and Kevin Feige basically is at a place where he should be looking for his next job in the want-ads or stepping down from Marvel Studios, because he's basically done at this point, because the cast that he's cast is, again, just too large. He's got the cast from the Fantastic Four, he's got the cast from the 2000 X-Men movie, he's got the cast from what's left of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in movies like Thunderbolts and Captain America, Brave New World, and none of this really incentivizes people to get excited about this movie, because the Avengers people want to see are the original Avengers, like Chris Evans' Captain America, Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, Chris Hemsworth's Thor, and many of those characters. But those characters basically have been put into the background, or they've been nerfed, like Mark Ruffalo's Hulk. So again, it basically doesn't answer that critical question of why should we care. And this film is careening towards train wreck, as I see it, from my years of experience of studying the entertainment industry. As someone who has studied the entertainment industry, I can tell you that this film is looking like one of those big budget train wrecks like Heaven's Gate or Halle Berry's Catwoman. It's looking like one of those big train wrecks that basically the studio poured a lot of money into the budget for, and then wound up taking a major loss on. That's what Avengers Doomsday is looking like to me. It's looking like this project is basically doomed, because when you have a cast of over 50 actors, there's no way to be able to tell a coherent story, and there's no way to introduce a main character that shows us what we want and why we should care. There's no way to do that in a cast that large, because you only have a limited amount of time to be able to present a story on screen, and many of these superhero movies basically have become so bloated that they're basically 3+ hours. So this film, again, is not going to be a profitable one for the studios, because studios and movie theaters love films that are 90 minutes or less, because 90-minute films, they can basically turn those films over and basically have more screenings per day than they would with a 3-hour movie. A 3-hour or 4-hour movie basically it's a whole day event, and the movie theaters really they can't afford that type of movie. So when I look at it, Doomsday is looking like a project that's doomed to be a disaster that could possibly be the one that puts the nail in the coffin for the tired superhero movie genre, a genre that, as I see it, should have rested all the way back in 2019 after Avengers Endgame and ended all of Phase 4, but Phase 4 became Fail 4 because Kevin Feige and Disney got greedy, and as they continued on this road to creating cash grab movies, basically they've burnt out the audience, and Avengers Doomsday may be the one that puts the nail in the coffin for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It may be the film that basically is the Doomsday for Marvel Studios, because this film will be so bloated and have such a huge budget that it basically will tank the genre, similar to what we saw with the movies in the 1960s, such as the musicals, the war movies, and the epic movies. Basically, the studios got caught back then because they were out of touch with reality. They couldn't see that the world had completely changed as the Vietnam War was going on, and many of the baby boomers weren't interested in these kinds of films. No, many of the baby boomers weren't interested in these kind of movies because they were seeing people, again, their friends and family being blown up at war, and they wanted to see films about life going on, like the civil rights movement and things going on as related to other cultures that were going on. But the studios had a lot of people who were tone deaf, and they basically drove themselves into almost bankruptcy because they couldn't listen. And the same thing here is going on with the baby boomer generation executives who still want to keep making these superhero movies because they're easy, that they think are easy cash grabs. However, like the epic movies, like the war movies, and the musicals, they basically have made films that are so bloated and so over budget that basically there's no way for them to pull a profit because these films are just too expensive. And when you have a cast of over 50 characters and you want to put them in two movies like Doomsday and Secret Wars, we have a serious problem as related to Hollywood, a serious problem because many of these people don't understand the business of entertainment, and as they don't understand the business of entertainment, they basically are trying to, again, desperately try to save the superhero movie genre, when the way you save the superhero movie genre is to let the genre rest and start focusing on some different types of movies, because it's clear that Gen Z is looking for different films based on what I have heard from many Gen Z people. They say that they want movies like the 80s and the 90s. They want the romances, they want the action movies, they want the comedies, they want the dramas, they want something different. But the studios are basically, again, because they're caught up in tunnel vision and they're caught up in this corporate obsession with grabbing cash, they can't see that they're basically spending good money after bad, and they can't see that they're going to be spending good money after bad and having a huge flop in Avengers Doomsday, one that basically is going to cost them basically the entire genre, because right now I'm looking at movies like Captain America Brave New World, which just flopped at the box office. Again, this movie flopped because the studio spent way too much money on it. They gave us a Captain America we didn't want, and the cast that you're presenting here is not the cast that the customers want. I mean, nobody wants to see Sam Wilson as Captain America, so why do you have him as Captain America in Doomsday? And why do you have, again, a cast of characters that aren't even around anymore? I mean, 2000s X-Men, I'm sitting there scratching my head about that one. You've got an over 50-year-old James Marsden playing Cyclops. You've got, again, people who are way past their prime. It's time to, again, focus on younger actors and building up a younger cast. But the sad part is they can't do that because they're locked into this universe. And as they're locked into this universe, they can't see it's the end of the world for possibly Disney, which has taken on so many losses, just like its competitor Warner Brothers, and showing us why we shouldn't have had that Telecom Act of 1996 come into law, because we're not getting competition in the entertainment industry. No, we're not getting competition in the entertainment industry. What we're getting is a group of oligarchs who basically, again, are so arrogant and full of themselves, they make stupid decisions. And Avengers Doomsday was a stupid decision made out of desperation because Marvel Studios, again, couldn't admit that, hey, this whole path of superhero movies is basically winding up and running its course, similar to the way that Star Wars ran its course in 1983 with Return of the Jedi. Basically, the trilogy was over, but back then the studio executives were smart and said, okay, the trilogy is over. We're going to focus on some new characters. We're going to focus on new characters in movies like Indiana Jones and other movies and make our money on new concepts because the audience has basically seen everything they want to see with this genre. We've seen everything finish here, and that's what smart executives do. But when you've got bean counters and nerds from Silicon Valley basically running the studios, they're running them into the ground because, again, they're too stupid to admit that this whole course has basically run. And again, a seasoned person who's in the entertainment industry, they know when to put a period at the end of things and start focusing on something different. They know, okay, this superhero genre ended with Avengers Endgame. We're going to put a period at the end of things, rest things as related to this concept, and then maybe come back with recast roles as related to many of these characters, and maybe basically start the Marvel Cinematic Universe back up, but with different characters, and start a whole storyline with a business plan, and a plan basically as related to creating an organic story, as related to an overreaching arc. That's what a seasoned executive would go out here and do as related to this whole situation. That's what a seasoned executive would do. He would have a plan, or she would have a plan to say, okay, the Infinity Saga is over. We're going to just basically rest this whole concept. And I would have not given Sam Wilson that shield. I mean, this is from my perspective as a business person. Would have just recast Steve Rogers because, again, it would have been just better off because we could have recast Steve Rogers. Wouldn't have killed off Tony Stark. Would have recast Tony Stark. And then we can go out here and restart the Marvel Cinematic Universe with a movie featuring a new character, and then bring in the old characters, and then basically be able to re-establish the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That would have been my plan, but Kevin Feige wanted to go for the big drama and get the big dollars, and now he's getting ready to take the biggest loss because he overreached and overstepped. And that's what happens to many studio executives who don't know about having a perspective on things. They don't have that seasoning and experience to say, okay, this is where I start to put the end at the end of things, start to focus on something else, and start focusing on something else. Maybe 3, 4, 5 years later, we come out with something new. But then let the other studio divisions, like the animation division at Disney, pull out some projects. Have somebody at Touchstone, if it's still around, or New Line Cinema put out, New Line I think is Warner Brothers, but they put out some of these smaller budget movies and get money that way. But Hollywood, again, is a complete mess at this point. It's a complete mess at this point. And Avengers Doomsday is doomed to be a failure at the box office. Mark my words on that. It's doomed to be a failure because a film with a cast this large and a budget this bloated, there's no way it can reach profitability. There's no way a film like this can reach profitability because this film basically doesn't have the structure to be able to tell a good story. No, you can't really tell a good story with over 50 actors in a movie. You can't tell it because you have too many characters. This is something I know from my years of being a writer. You cannot have so many characters in a story because it becomes cluttered, and what happens is characters can't get any sort of development, and that prevents you from being able to transform a character and their arc. It prevents you from being able to tell an effective story, and that's where Doomsday is doomed because the structure in and of itself is not one that is strong. It is not a strong structure for storytelling where we get a main character that has something that they want and a reason for us to care. No, there's no reason for us to care if you have a cast that's bloated. There's no way for anybody to be able to develop and transform as a character, and all of that is going to be a major problem with Doomsday. It's just a doomed project. It's a project that is doomed to fail because this whole project, basically like many of the later epic movies, later war movies, and later musicals, is set up to be a disaster because of its just lack of vision at the front. And because of that lack of vision and that desperation, this project is basically, again, doomed to be the Doomsday for Marvel Studios, and doomed to be the Doomsday for Marvel Studios that would possibly lead to the termination of Kevin Feige and his tenure at Marvel Studios. Now, my first full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, is available on Lulu.com, and you can pick up a paper copy of that John Haynes comic for the same price as the 2022 Kickstarter. And if you want to check out my first digital comic, A Steam No Good Deed, you can find that comic on Kindle for just 99 cents. And if you want to check out the stories of the SJS Direct universe, you can find all of those stories in the SJS Direct universe, such as the ISIS series, the Steam series, the John Haynes series, and books in like the Spinsterella trilogy, my sorority novel, The Thetas, my vampire novel, Eternal Night. You can find all of these books in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you'd like to see me make more videos taking Hollywood to the barbecue, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Coming to paperback and e-readers, the Steam Season of the Witch Girl. The aspiring angel takes on a wicked teenage witch in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Pre-order your copy of Esteem Season of the Witch Girl at Amazon.com and other online booksellers. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.